Hello everyone, welcome to 24 Hours of Past Summit Preview. Today you are going to be seeing Kevin Kline's session on irreplaceable techniques to fireproof your IT career. As you probably know, if you've been on this before, this is a 24-hour pass event that normally consists of 24 consecutive live webinars. We're already into it, so there's not 24 left at this point. But the sessions are recorded and they will be posted online after the event. I'm Steve Wake. I am actually a consultant with RevGen Partners here in the Denver, Colorado area, and also president of the Denver SQL Server User Group. So those of you that are in the Denver, Colorado area, please look us up at denversql.org. And we're just going to go through a few little introductory items here, and then we'll get on over to Kevin's presentation. And he's going to speak for probably about 40-45 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A at the end to go over some of this stuff. So as you see from this slide, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, type them into the question pane that's shown there on the screenshot. If you're having issues with the size of your screen, make sure that you have the zoom settings set correctly so that you can actually see all of the slides that are being presented to you at this time. Now's a good time to kind of check on that to make sure everything is set up correctly. And then if you have anything other that you want to actually ask questions to Kevin as well, you can type those into that same question pane. That if you had any problems during the session, you can use the same place. And then I will monitor those questions throughout the session and try to answer them myself. And if I can't answer them, it's something that we need to get Kevin to answer, then we'll save it for the end of the presentation and do it then. Okay, next, Kevin. So we need to, we can't do these kind of things without the help of these fantastic sponsors. So for this particular event, our sponsors are Microsoft, which hopefully everybody knows since we're talking mostly about Microsoft SQL Server. But they're a great sponsor of this event. And then also Dell Software is also a sponsor of this event as well to help us keep this event going on a regular basis. All right, next. And for those of you that don't know, our big event that's coming up here in the first week of November is the PASS Summit 2014, which is going to be in Seattle, Washington. And it's a large event that we have quite a few people coming, usually over 5,000 people coming, including me, and I think Kevin will be there as well that we'll talk about. Representing a whole bunch of countries, so it's a great time to get together and share with a bunch of other people that are all doing the same thing. We're all pretty much all SQL Server experts, so that's the conference to go to if you aren't already planning going. It is November 4th through the 7th, and if you use the discount code that's shown there on the slide, 24HOP14, that will get you $200 off the current registration fee. So make sure you use that when you go to register, and it's showing right now that the registration fee is $18.95 up until the end of next week. So make sure you try to take advantage of that, because I think that's the last price cut before it goes to pretty much full price. So try to take advantage of that if you haven't already. All right, so we're introducing our speaker here. This is Kevin Kline. He is the Director of Engineering Services at SQL Century. Has also been a MVP since 2003 and was the founder and former president of our wonderful organization PASS that we're all doing this for, and is also a well-known author, blogger, columnist, and speaker. Travels around the country and the world actually doing that, and he's been actually out in our area a couple of years ago and all over the place doing speaking events. So you're in for a treat today with Kevin's session. So I will turn it over to Kevin and let him take over.
Thanks very much, Steve. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. If you are in the USA, perhaps you're somewhere else on the globe, and so you're actually experiencing this session, perhaps morning, wherever you are. But thanks for carving out an hour of your time to spend it with us today. This is actually a 75-minute session. It includes all the slides that I will present in the 75 minutes I have allotted at the big SQL PASS conference this November. We're going to get through the preview of this. We're going to cover all the slides, but we're not going to go into quite as much detail as the actual presentation at the past summit. So we'll go a little bit quicker and probably finish up in 45 or 50 minutes, depending on the kind of questions that we have during the session. And so during that time, feel free to ask any questions, and as we have time, we'll make sure that those get answered and just go from there. And just one other quick note, if you want to connect with me on social media, not just Twitter, but Facebook or LinkedIn, you would type in twitter.com/KEKline, and you'll get me on Twitter. If you do that on Facebook, you'll get me on Facebook. If you do that on LinkedIn, you'll find me there as well. So I hope you'll take advantage of social media and get involved there, as well as my blog, for example, on kevinekline.com. So with that, let's talk about Irreplaceable, techniques to fireproof your IT career. How to make sure that you are, not the person who gets laid off when layoffs happen, or redundancies, as they say in the UK, when those happen. How to make sure that your career is on a steady upward trajectory, and that you are held in high regard, both by your peers and by your superiors. That's what today's session is about. And so let's talk about the framework for this discussion. Irreplaceable is a strong word. We don't often describe a lot of people as irreplaceable, and there are even some negative connotations of being irreplaceable. You might not think about that. When we think about irreplaceable, we think, well, that means you're incredibly valuable. You're priceless. We can't find another one just like you. But if you are irreplaceable, and sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, well, that person is trying to work themselves into a position in which they are, they're irreplaceable. The negative connotation is, if you're irreplaceable, you could potentially be unpromotable as well. We can't take this person out of that job because they're the only one who can do it. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that kind of job security where you've made the kind of work that you're doing so hard to understand that nobody else can do that job. What I'm talking about is a different kind of irreplaceable. Irreplaceable in the sense that the company, your superiors, your peers, couldn't imagine working without you. But they could imagine a situation in which you are there doing something even more valuable than what you're doing right now. So we want to get to a position where people don't want to work in this place without us, but they could certainly see themselves in a situation in which you might be the person who leads the team. You might be the person who gets that promotion. And that's the kind of irreplaceable that we really want to strive for. And we achieve that through conscious and deliberate actions, believe it or not. It doesn't just happen by accident. There are certain very repeatable sorts of things that we see people who are in that position. We see them do these things over and over again around the world in their IT organizations. It's a simple three-part set of behaviors. The first is we're going to start with attitude. Now, I explained that a little bit. And we're going to reinforce that with some things beyond attitude. How competent are you technically? We're going to call that aptitude. And then we're going to dive into 5 specific behaviors that the management consultants and the big business schools like the Harvard Business School and Wharton and Chicago School of Business and all those top research institutes around management and leadership, what are the practices that they have found in their research that people constantly perform to be considered irreplaceable in a very positive sort of way in their IT organization? So we're going to dive into each of those in turn. So let's talk about this. If we were to use an analogy here and say, okay, I'm going to try and make my career one of these careers that's on this upward trajectory, and I am a person who is highly valued at my organization. They don't ever want to let me go. I'm going to use the analogy of a construction project. I'm going to build a house, let's say. And so, there's whenever we have a big construction project, there's the laying the foundation. If you're building a high-rise, there's you got to dig a very deep, usually very deep, down into the bedrock kind of foundation. Maybe a house is built on a slab of concrete, or maybe it's built on what we call a crawl space. And then the house gets framed in. and we haven't yet put in, the brick or the clapboard or whatever the different things are on the sides that cover it. And then there's finally the finish work, the outer cladding of the building, the inner drywall of the building, the windows, the crown molding and the floorboards and the carpet and all that stuff. So using that as our analogy, let's make it a question. Which of these, if the foundation of our successful career, is it, like being really funny, A, snarky one-liners, or could it be B, donuts? Like I know a person in my company was, hired this time last year, and every week they brought in donuts. And I give them a lot of points for that, believe it or not, and I think that's a pretty clever move. Or is it C, attitude? For that matter, what about framing? Framing the building. We're reinforcing we're building the reinforced overall structure of the building. Is it something like A, snappy fashion, or hey, that person is really stylish? Or is it, similar to donuts? Are we buying free beer for everybody and ingratiating ourselves with our peers? Or is it C, technical competence? And then finally, that finish work. What's going to get you that kind of fully fleshed out career? Is it in, just stark naked ambition, hopping jobs every 16 or 18 months, 12 months, or is it maybe, we know some people really know how to suck it up with the boss, and kind of ingratiate themselves with the boss? Or is it some specific deliberate behaviors we can do? And of course, you can see this is kind of a leading set of questions. I'm trying to lighten the mood a little bit. Yeah, it's not donuts, and it's not free beer, and it's not sucking up to the boss. It's a combination of things. And it is, that is brought together through deliberate and conscientious thought and action. So a lot of people are like, yeah, I've been meaning to do that. I've got good intentions. That's not going to actually get you to a position in which you're irreplaceable. What's going to happen in a case where you have good intentions is people will know that you have good intentions, but they'll say, that person doesn't have a history of delivering success. And here's the thing: when you set out on a process of building your career, you never ever have to apologize for success. When you are given an assignment and you complete it successfully, it's done and it goes to your credit, right? And so that's the sort of thing that is going to give you headway in your career. So let's talk about this. Let's dive in a little bit more detail on this. We start with attitude. And I think one of the things that we do as IT people is we think about, and we'll spend an enormous amount of time, intellectual time, not necessarily real clock time as the clock is moving, ticking away the moments, but we'll spend brain time thinking about a particular problem that we have on our SQL server or we have in developing an application, and we will think about it. We will kind of deconstruct the problem. We will diagnose the problem. We will troubleshoot it. We'll try different alternatives until we hit on the right way to get a particular problem solved. And yet we will never, ever do the same sort of thing with people, right? For some reason, it's a natural tendency for those of us who work with IT to focus on the things that we work with on a regular basis and not to focus on the people that we work with on a regular basis. So one of the first things that people who tend to have these really powerfully upward moving careers, one of the things that they do, even if they're the best .NET developer on the team or they are an extremely talented SQL Server DBA or business intelligence person, is they analyze the tasks that they are given, the jobs that they are supposed to perform in terms of the people that they work with. And, we could say they have a customer service attitude. Maybe the first thing we need to do when someone approaches us is to ask them more questions that are very open-ended and listen to them speak more rather than immediately start to kind of espouse a particular idea or a solution or something like that. Another thing that we see really successful people, people who don't get replaced, who don't get moved out of the way so that someone else can get a promotion, is people who express appreciation and gratitude. Someone who considers the work that other people are doing, and they indicate how much it means to them in a real human and genuine sort of way. And also, they talk about their own experiences in terms of their position of need. So one of the things I see a lot of the Microsoft MVPs do, many of the speakers that you would see at the past summit are going to be people who have the special credential called the Microsoft Most Valuable Professional credential, an MVP. And one of the things that I hear people ask the MVPs say, they'll say, you're such an expert. Why do you spend so much time helping people for free? And one of the things that a lot of these MVPs say is, well, I just can't help but think about the time when I was just out of college. I was 23 years old in my first professional career, and there was someone in my office who was more than willing and more than happy to help me out. And I can't help but do that for others. That was such a great example to me, and I appreciated that. And I felt like that was the right thing for me to do with other people and to share the knowledge that I have. And when you express your experience with technology as a people-driven thing, suddenly you're thought of in a very, very different way than the other IT people that you work with. So just by doing that, you have made yourself more remarkable than 50% of the other IT people that you work with. And think about the movies that you've seen that have an IT person in them. What are the stereotypes those IT people are depicted with? Because they're usually depicted with one of two different kind of stereotypes. One stereotype is this kind of strange girl with the dragon tattoo sort of person who's got lots of piercings and tattoos all over, and has, purple hair, and, they, have goth style of dress, and people are terrified to go and talk to this person, right? And then the other kind of IT person stereotype is, this loner who works down in the basement, and he's, he types like 8,000 words a minute, just incredibly fast typist, real kind of furious concentration. His eyes are almost square from staring at the computer day and night, and people are like, hey, I really need some help with this and such, and he's like, just get out of the way and let me sit down and do this work, because, it's just going to be so much easier if I get to do this instead of me telling you how to. And people have two really negative stereotypes of IT people. One is both of them are very competent at IT, but both of them are people who don't like other people. One's very arrogant, the second kind of person, and the first one is very kind of aloof and hard to understand or get along with. They're not people who express appreciation or gratitude, happy to be where they are and thankful for that and happy to pay it forward. So by doing those things yourself, you've instantly broken the stereotype, and people are like, wow, something's different about this person. Similarly, integrity and honor. Like if someone comes to you in need and you say, wow, you really need some help. What can I do to solve this problem? Instead of reacting with annoyance. A lot of people get annoyed when somebody needs something from them. Now, of course, other coworkers and things like that might try to take advantage of that. You don't want to go that far, but are you the sort of person who means what you say, and you say, that kind of integrity and honor? You're honest. If someone says, what do you think of this solution? And you don't think it's very good, you might say, I think there are better ways to solve it. You don't have to be mean about it or anything like that, but you can be honest. And when somebody says, you know what, the boss says that doesn't matter, that there are better ways, that's the way that it needs to be done, you might express, well, I think these other choices are better choices because of this reason, whatever that reason might be, but let's get to work on that. That's, we've gotten our marching orders, let's do it. And so you do what you need to do, right? That's integrity, that's honor. And finally, another thing that is, really about the attitude of the person in that particular role in the IT organization focuses on motivation. And many people in the, in our work environment so often really spend a lot of their time figuring out what is the minimum I can do to be successful in it. And one of the most powerful things that the research tells us that really, really successful, irreplaceable people in organizations do is they don't settle for what is the minimum I can do. What they look for is they're self-motivated by doing a job well and do as effectively as they can. And sometimes that means they need to take steps even when no one has asked them or demanded of them that they begin to do a particular set of work. For example, if you're a database administrator, nobody asked you to make sure that the databases are free of corruption on a really regular basis. But you know that this is going to make your life so much easier if there ever is a situation in which you have to do a recovery on a system. And so you are motivated not necessarily by being told or demanded what you should be doing, what tasks you need to be working on, but rather what is the best and optimal way to get this work done, taking pride in your work, and then taking the initiative to make sure that those things happen without impacting your deadlines. So, you're a developer and you've got a milestone at a certain particular time, but you know that one of the key things that you need to do is write code that's really maintainable. And a key part of maintainable code is documenting that as you go along. So rather than writing code that has no documentation, has no standardization in it, you take the time and the extra effort to make sure it has those things. Because maybe you are going to have to support that. And if you've ever had the embarrassing experience like I have of going back to your own code to maintain it a year and a half later and you haven't looked at it in a year and a half, and you're like, what was I thinking? Am I stupid? I don't think I was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. But that's the reason why we document things, because it is not always evident just by looking at the code what that is. So what is your motivation? Motivated? Do you take initiative? If you are the kind of person that does that, again, you have put yourself in a different category than the vast majority of people that you work with. Just trying to figure out what is the minimum I could do to not get in trouble with my boss. One of the key underlying takeaways from the idea of attitude at work is that people people are memorable not for the specific things that they did in a step-by-step fashion. They are much more memorable for how you make them feel. So if you come in and you write the best T-SQL code in the world, and it is the tightest, best executing code anybody's ever seen, but you make them feel really sorry they have you, at the end of the day, that's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember how great your code is. And I've worked with so many people who are stellar IT professionals, but they're not nice people. And at the end of the day, those are people that the boss wants to replace as soon as he gets the chance, right? So how you make your coworkers, your boss, your subordinates feel has a lot to do with the longevity and success of your career. Okay, so that's the foundation. What's your attitude? Now, in my career, I have hired many people and interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And two things, as I mentioned, that I always look for. The first is attitude. The second one is aptitude. And one of the things that I like to think about with aptitude. Aptitude is how effective you are with the things that you work with. How well do you know Management Studio or Visual Studio? How well do you know the internals of the database that you're working on? What version of SQL Server is it, and what are the ramifications of using that versus something else? Or what's going to happen if we have downtime? How do we recover? That's your technical aptitude. However, one of the things that happens very, very frequently in people who have a high degree of aptitude is their skills are relevant for like one version or two versions. And they do not spend a lot of time making sure that their skills are constantly being refreshed. The fact that you're paying attention to this session probably puts you into a different category than many other people. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years who said, I'm really worried about my job. And I'm like, well, tell me about your job. They're like, well, I'm a DBA, and And I say, well, DBAs are in extremely high demand these days. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics here in the USA says that DBAs are one of the highest growth professions, high-paying professions in the USA, and will be for the next 10 years. Why are you worried about your job? And they're like, well, we've been doing some migrations and we're using some different platforms than what I know, and I'm really worried about that. And I say, technologies come and go. Why are you worried about new technologies? And they're like, well, I haven't learned anything new in years, and I don't want to learn something new now. And that's a very worrying thing to hear, because if you work in technology, your life is lived with a version number on it, right? And some of you on the on the session right now might be have been working with IT long enough to remember Windows 95, right? But we don't use Windows 95 anymore. And then came Windows XP, and some of us still use Windows XP. But even if we still use that version today, we know that it's pretty darn old, and we also know that Microsoft doesn't support it anymore and wants us to get off of it. So if you're not staying current, you're actually not living the life of an IT person. You have found some reason to stagnate, and that is a really worrying thing for me as a hiring manager. If I'm looking at you and you're like, well, I'm looking at a list of 20 people in my organization, and the executives have said we have to cut 10% across the board because we're in financial straits. And I'm looking at all 20 people who work for me. I'm going to be looking at the two who have cared the least. Of course, I mentioned attitude, so I'm going to take that into account, but I'm also going to take a look at aptitude. And I'm probably going to be thinking a lot about the people who have learned the least new things and have stayed the least current over time. That is an extremely important aspect of our lives as technologists. It's a tiring aspect of our life as technologists. A lot of us get tired of learning new things when you've been in your career 30 years, as I have. But that's part, that just comes with the territory. And you have to develop the ability to learn new things and be curious, be a lifetime learner. Now, another key aspect of technical competence and your aptitude is, are you ready for the clutch play? Okay, and what does that mean? The clutch play is if you're not in the U.S., here in the U.S. we hear it all the time. Sports newscasters telling us about somebody who's in some big sporting event, in basketball, for example. They're making the person is making the free throw, and they only have a certain amount of time to to get it right, or else the play is lost, and they'll never recover that chance again. But you have to spend hours and hours, days and days practicing for the clutch play before it actually ever happens. You have to think about it ahead of time. You have to practice. You have to be ready. And it's the same thing for us as IT people. We have to be ready for the server down situation. We have to be ready to recover it. We have to have practiced. We have to have done it ahead of time and know exactly what steps we're going to go through to make sure it gets back up on its feet in a timely fashion. We have to do that. And that's a big indication of our aptitude, how ready we are for that. And then another aspect of technical competence and our aptitude is not that we have a voluminous amount of knowledge, but actually to know what our limit is and to say, you know what, I am a relational database guy. I don't know anything about the business intelligence side of the house. But I recognize that I don't know anything about the business intelligence side of the house, and I have cultivated a couple sources that can tell me, that seem to have the same kind of worldview I do, and they can tell me what they would choose based on their expertise, because they really are expert. And so, there's a lot of really prominent bloggers that you could follow who can help guide your thoughts on that. So it's okay to say, you know what, I'm a DBA. I'm not a developer, or conversely, I'm a developer. I don't know all kinds of internals about SQL Server, but that's okay. That's fine. I know that these other people are experts at that, and those are the people I will go to when I have a question about, let's say, database internals. So know your limits, embrace them. Part of us becoming extremely good at a particular kind of technology isn't how much we invest in specific competence, it's how much we're willing to say no to. And I'm not going to spend my time in these other competencies. And so by saying no to other things, we can become much, much deeper and richer in our knowledge for a specific set of things. So going back a slide, we talked about attitude. That's the foundation. And then we came forward to aptitude. That's like the framing of the building, right? And then finally, the finish work, the techniques, actions, and behaviors that IT pros exhibit in a repeated fashion. I'll discuss those in a little more details in the next few minutes. But key concept for you to take away here on the aptitude slide is that one of the things that IT people are afraid to do a lot of the times, a lot of us are naturally introverted, and so we're afraid to express an opinion. And here is the secret formula to having a winning opinion every time. Now, you may not win the argument or the discussion or the decision that's being made right now, but your opinion will always be held in high regard if you use this formula. And the formula is, what is the shared value of this particular IT team in the context of the decision that's being discussed? If you voice your opinion based on that shared value, you will always score points with everyone else. So let's say, for example, the director of product development at your company, you're a developer, and they have said, we have to choose some new version control and source control for all of our SQL Server servers. All of the code that we put into a SQL Server, stored procedures, triggers, views, user-defined functions, everything. We need, and you don't really have an opinion. You haven't looked at the different products out there in the market. There's lots of good ones, and some are better at one thing, and some are better at other, and some are more expensive, and some are, you don't know which is best. Well, here's the winning opinion. What does the team share as a value? So if you were given the opportunity to express your value, you could say something like, well, you know, I don't know what the best product is, but I do know that this team values speed of delivery more than anything else. Now, your team, that may not be what your team values. Your team may value the highest quality code possible, or, you know, the highest efficiency code, you know, not necessarily bug-free. It might be the most efficient code, or the best, you know, highest performing code, or the quickest code to development. Whatever that particular key value is of your team, if you say, you know, I've looked at our team and how we behave, and what we value more than anything else is being frugal. Well, if our value is around being frugal, that makes it pretty clear which source control product you want to go with. You want to go with the least expensive one on the market, right? That still meets your needs. So that's the way to have a winning opinion every time. And you score lots of points just for expressing that opinion. Even if you don't convince anybody to change the decision,
Kevin, I think we lost we lost him completely. All right, everybody, it looks like Kevin went offline, unfortunately, so hopefully he's trying to reconnect and we can pick up where we were. But he's still going. I'll see if I can get him on chat.
effective. Okay.
Oh, there he is. Sorry, Kevin, we lost your audio there for a couple minutes, unfortunately.
All of this slide, or?
Yeah, before you actually switched over to that current slide.
Okay.
Right at the end of that previous one, yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, as I was saying, the key concept here is just by having an opinion that's based on the shared value of the team. So let's say, you know, you're the director of your department is really about cutting costs and being frugal. Then if you say, you know, we're looking at a source control system, but I know what we really care about is being frugal, and then I think we should, you know, go with product X. I haven't even looked at all the different features, and so just expressing your opinion based on a shared value that is known to the whole team, that alone moves you into an elite category of people. Okay. Now, still with me, Steve?
Yep, you're still here.
Okay. Yeah, just jump in right away if I drop out for more than a moment or two.
All right.
So one of the things that a lot of us in IT do is we spend a lot of time being really efficient, but not not at all effective. And think about that for a minute. What's the difference between efficient and effective? What's the difference between doing and delivering, right? So what people who are considered irreplaceable in their organizations, what they look for is the end results. Am I giving you the results that you looked for? Not how busy am I in the process of doing those kind of things. Are you actually working towards a goal? Are you progressing towards that? Are you keeping track of the key performance indicators? Now, on the development side, this is often a lot easier because you've got project milestones. We've got to get this to QA, this code to QA by a certain period of time. We've got to get it to, into staging by, a sort of time after that. It's a little bit harder on the administrative functions because most of us who are admins, we just kind of have this very vague team goal of keep the servers up. And so, what does that mean that we're delivering, as opposed to doing? I can be busy all day long, and the servers are going to stay up, actually, whether I'm busy or not. So one of the things that you might want to consider if you're in the administrative role is that if you don't have team goals beyond keep the server up, that's when you create synthetic goals of your own. And in my case, one of the first things I learned to do in a situation like that where, as an administrator, all we had to do was keep things up and running, was to figure out all of the normal metrics and parameters for the behavior of our systems. What did a normal amount of uptime look like? What did a normal amount of reads and write and I/O and memory activity on these servers look like? And so that enabled us to set higher standards than for the next year. Now that we know what normal is, how are we going to make things better? Because if you don't know what normal is, you also will not know what abnormal is, nor will you know whether you've improved performance or not. So you have to learn those things too. So work that doesn't align with your team goals, or even worse, if you don't have team goals, it's wasted effort. So you need to build those team goals and communicate how well you're meeting those goals. That's one of the things that really, really irreplaceable and successful people do is there's a fine line between bragging and actually just describing, giving that communication that tells people how you're progressing against those different goals. And again, focus on the work that matters and not being busy. I've had friends in college who spend an enormous amount fiddling with pictures and they're, hey, because social media is important, right? Yeah, it's important, but is that really the work that matters? You can be very efficient in working with your pictures, but not the least bit effective in your job. So focus on the work that matters. If you don't know what matters, that's what you got to figure out first. It's a strong goal-oriented work ethic and a commitment to quality that really will set a lot of us apart from the kind of rank and file members of our IT organization. Focusing on what it is that needs to get done at the end of the day, not just on being busy throughout the day. Now, another thing that's really interesting is, and again, this is backed up by an enormous number of studies done by the different management consultancies and the different business schools, is this concept of resilience. And one of the things that happens to everyone, every single person on the planet, is that we are going to have setbacks. In fact, many people who might be considered an irreplaceable IT person can even lose a job. It's possible that the company you work for gets acquired by a much bigger company, and they decide that new company decides to lop off an entire section of the organization, and so 200 people lose their job, even though you were awesome at what you did. What a really irreplaceable person does is they learn how to cope with a setback. They learn how to learn from it and how to control what you can control, right? Make choices and take specific actions that will engender your success now and in the future. So resilience is kind of an interesting idea. If you think about how kids play, kids don't play about a boring day at work. Little kids who are playing, make-believe games, they play like pirates and, pirates with swords and having sword fights and cops and robbies. And really, they're play acting these crisis situations, right? And so I'm just going to talk about play right now. But that one thing is actually all about preparing them for a time in their life when they're an adult and they're actually in a crisis situation. And that's part of resilience, is being through a real crisis, out of it in a situation and not actually get the being able to for those. Am I still?
You're kind of dropping in and out there, Kevin.
Yeah, and folks, I apologize. I'm coming to you from a hotel, and so the network here may not be all that great. All right,
Yeah.
so let's move on. We have just a few more minutes and three more slides to finish up there. So another thing that you will want to focus on is solutions, not problems. One of the things that one of my bosses said to me, and that I have in turn said to people who work for me, is I don't want to hear just complaints all the time. If you have a really serious complaint, I'd like to hear your thoughts about how we can make that better. What's the solution, not just the problem, And that's something that has a very important kind of optics, I guess you could say. Right? So if you're always pointing out problems but never solutions, you can come to be seen as a person who is a complainer, not a problem solver. And so you want to focus on how can we best solve problems as much as possible. You want to propose ideas that are practical and pragmatic that help us reach our goal. And sometimes that means we don't choose the perfect solution because it costs too much. Or perfect is going to take 80% more work than good enough. So many of us who claim to be perfectionists, this is a real problem because perfectionism can seriously impede productivity and effectiveness. It causes us to really focus on things that don't add a lot of value, but it does add an enormous amount of work to the particular project that we're working on. So just remember that if we're complainers and we're not seen to be solving problems, that casts us in a negative light. In fact, silence is also bad for a lot of us, because if you're never a person who gives an opinion, who identifies solutions, then you may not be seen at all, as opposed to being seen as a person who adds value in the organization you're at. All right? So the idea here is that we tend to be very detail-oriented, and the IT pro who can remember the goals first and break those down into small problems and offer solutions to those problems, innovations to those problems, is going to have a huge leg up on everyone else in the organization. You're going to be the one to get the promotion. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier about resilience. Can you suffer a setback and recover from it? And I also mentioned earlier about aptitude. Are you learning new stuff, or are you stagnant? And this is especially important for those of us who are working hard in IT. You have to have a mindset of growth. There's kind of the opposite mindset, which I guess we could call the static mindset, where we don't want things to grow. We want them to stay the way they are. But the really smart IT pro is going to focus on an intentional kind of cultivation of your skills, right? I'm going to go ahead and attend these webinars, on the 24 hours that pass, even though it keeps me up way, way late, because I need to learn how to do these things. I need to handle these, learn how to handle these specific sorts of problems. Requires it because I care, right? And it doesn't have to be, an approach that is all or nothing. It could be small and incremental over time, and that will result in good progress. one of the really interesting things, too, that we find in the social sciences where they study personal growth is that a lot of people say, I'm not ready for that. I'll tackle that particular problem or that particular stage in my career when I have learned more about how to do that. But what we have found often is that people who have that mindset never really develop the full amount of confidence they feel they need to tackle that new challenge. And what often happens with the people who are kind of in this category of irreplaceable, or the Top Gun sort of people in an organization, the one who always seems to get the promotions and stuff like that, they have the attitude in reverse, which is, I think I'm going to try this, and once I learn it, or once I get that job, I'm going to learn it well enough to be really, really good at it. And I'll get really confident in my skills after I'm already doing that work. And so they kind of, put the horse in front of the cart there, and they say, I'm going to get the job, and then I'm going to learn all the skills. Whereas people who, kind of lag in their career often say, you know what, I'm just not ready for that. And when I'm ready for it, that's when I'll take a chance on it. And it turns out that can really hold you back in the long term. And it comes down to fear. I'm trying not to get myself in any danger whatsoever. But it's the same thing as what they say in the financial prospectuses. It says, the element of risk is one of your better indicators of potential growth for a particular kind of mutual fund, let's say. You have to be able to take a little bit of risk, calculated risk, in order to develop that personal growth mindset. Now, overreach is kind of the opposite of that. You have to be able to overcome that stretching too far. Do you have a backup plan if you've taken on too much? Can I grow into that effectively? Because there are times when we can try to do it, but we're not effective in the way that we grow. And so we've overreached, and now we can't actually reach that goal that we set. So there is a counterbalance to that fear that holds us back. You can go too far, but you got to learn your limits. And once you have figured that out, don't stop holding back. You want to start moving forward again and grow. Build a personal growth plan. What are the areas where I'm strong? What are the areas where I'm weak? What are the areas where I'm absolutely deficient? Understand those, and then build a growth plan to shore up those different deficiencies, the weaknesses, and the strengths. And I talk about this in a lot more detail in the full session at the past conference. All right, quick note there. Fake it until you make it. Lean in. These are specific guidelines that came out of the book Lean In by the Sheryl Sandberg, the top female at Facebook. And I'll talk about that a lot more at the past conference as well. All right, so let's move on to the last slide. We don't have too much time left, so I got to hurry along. So one of the things that a lot of us do as IT people is that we tend to be a little bit more introverted. Now, some of us are very warm and social and talkative, but a lot of us aren't. I'd say probably the majority of us aren't. And so one of the things that happens is for those of us who want to be irreplaceable in our organizations, we realize that it really is based on our social and cooperative relationships. There's the old saying of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And although much of IT is a meritocracy, it's based on your skill at the particular IT job that you're trying to do at the moment, who you know and how well you have built that relationship, how friendly and warm it is going to be extremely important. And a lot of people don't realize that the importance of those relationships might come in 2 or 3 or 4 years later down the road, when the person who you were so helpful to and you encouraged and praised and supported, they're now the manager at another company, and they're looking for somebody with just your skills. So who are they going to try to remember? The one who made them feel good about working, or the one who was really good at his job but really made me feel pretty bad about coming to work today? Well, it's going to be the person who tries to cultivate a warm relationship. And so that's why you want to try to communicate frequently and in a positive sort of engagement, help others without expecting to get, some kind of transactional payback. And most people intuitively know that there is some sort of payback, that they are on the hook to help you when you have a similar need. So you don't expect it, but when it's given, you are genuinely grateful for it and you express appreciation for that. And one of the things that's really interesting, it's ancient advice. It has been there since Western culture has developed a tradition of academics, which is based, they call it the Socratic method, in which Socrates would ask his disciple, Plato, he'd ask him a question, and that it would in turn lead to another question that would widen the discussion, each time kind of helping, the mentor, helping the protege learn skills. One of the most powerful things you can do to advance your career is to develop a warm relationship with a person somewhere in either in your organization, or if not in your organization, and one that has a similar sort of approach to the world, who will mentor you. And that alone can change the whole scope of your career and make it a much, much more powerful and upward pointing sort of career. So I won't spend too much more time on that since we're low on time, but if you're alone, you're much more likely to get cold in bad times. In good times, if you have friends and allies, you are actually setting yourselves up for better things, as opposed to everybody else in the organization who doesn't have friends or allies, because that's kind of the majority of people these days who don't have a lot going on in that kind of alliance sort of way of handling things. All right, so now to wrap up and hopefully have some time for a couple of questions from Steve. Just remember, there's a couple things that we want to do in general. We want to have this this approach to life that involves having a good attitude. We want to have kind of a lifelong learner sort of approach to our technical aptitudes, that we're going to be learning new stuff throughout our career, and that we can't kind of vegetate and get stagnant in our skills. We have to move along. We have to be willing to invest in our skills and cultivate those, make them grow. And then those people who are truly irreplaceable in their organizations, they consistently exhibit at least 3, if not more, of the 5 behaviors, focusing on delivering real results as opposed to just coming into the office and being busy. Oh, the boss is looking in at me. Am I on Facebook, or do I have Management Studio open? The Visual Studio is there, and so they can't tell that I'm really falling asleep at my desk, right? Practicing resilience and being able to recover from bad times, and being able to be the key player in a clutch play moment. Working on solutions and not just pointing out problems. Being someone who innovates and is creative about how we get things done in an effective, not just efficient way. Focusing on a growth mindset and getting better all the time, every year, step by step. Could be slow progress, it could be fast progress, but in either case, you are making some forward progress all the time. And then finally, focusing on cultivating allies and making friends who are willing to help you. Not just the kind of people who sit down at the lunch table with you and share a story or two, but people actually come through for you and help you when you really need some help. That will pay dividends far, far into the future, especially if at least one of those people is in a position to be a good mentor to you. That will provide enormous benefits throughout your career. All right, so just a few quick follow-up URLs as well. There is a professional development virtual chapter for PASS, so that's professionaldevelopment.sequelpass.org. There's a website called Tech Republic, and they have some topic discussion areas, and one of them is leadership. And it's not just stuff for leaders, it's all the soft skills that you might need to be working on in the office. And so it's a really good place to read things, hiring tips, or, how to conduct a meeting, or, how to be more productive with to-do lists, all kinds of great tips about just professional skills. I have a professional development website called 4IT Pros, and we put out a newsletter every month, so you might want to take a look at that. And then again, as I mentioned at the start of the session, you can get in touch with me at K.E. Kline on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, my website, kevinekline.com, and then you can reach me by email at kekline@sequelcentury.com. So with that, Steve, how are we doing on time?
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and there are a few questions. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but one of them that's in here that I thought was a good one to go through was this person is saying that it's is it time to move on when one can't see any appreciation, attitude, and aptitude from your superior? It says that he realizes that you know more than your current manager. It says that you're learning all the latest and greatest tools, and your manager is still, thinking about the older technologies. Is that a sign that it's time to move on or not?
Right. Great question. There are a lot of reasons to move on from a current boss. One of the key things isn't necessarily, it depends on the organization, of course, and the role of the particular team you're on. A lot of really, really good managers, in my experience, haven't necessarily been the best technologists on the team. Some outstanding managers have been the people most effective at putting different resources onto a task and getting that task accomplished. So if your manager is the kind of person who is able to, take the different challenges and problems that your team is being given and allocate resources effectively and get good results out of that, then you might not want to leave that manager, because people on that manager, if that manager is being productive and effective, and that's visible to the senior executives, you as a part of that team will get a bit of that, credibility +1 sort of stuff. On the other hand, if that person isn't doing any of those things, so not only do they not know the technology anywhere near as well as you, but they're also not a particularly good manager, well, when you've got both of those things together, then that might be the sign that I should start looking.
Right. I think we'll probably have to have the other ones were kind of similar in vein. Actually, they're pretty similar to that specific question. So I think there's some more slides there at the end of your deck that we probably need to get to here about some of the other stuff. There we go. So that one is just kind of, if you liked what you saw here with Kevin, he does have 2 sessions actually at the past summit coming up, so just kind of another ad here at the end for get your registration in for past summit if you haven't already, and don't forget to use that discount code 24HOP14 to get the $200 off, but make sure you do that. And next up, just to kind of let people know, for the next session in the 24 Hours of Past preview is the Predictive Analytics in the Enterprise session by a fellow Coloradan, Carlos Bassi as well. So if you're into the analytics space, that's a good session. I've actually seen that presented many times in our local area by Carlos, so switch over to that one coming up here in the next couple of minutes if you're interested in that. And then I think we just got one more slide that's just a thank you for attending. So, yep, thanks everybody for attending the session, and if you had any other questions for Kevin or I, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me on Twitter as well. I'm just Steve Wake on Twitter, so it's very easy to get a hold of me there as well. So thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kevin.